Welcome to the Speaking of Women's Health podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Holly Thacker, and I am so glad to be back in the Sunflower House. And today's guest is just a wonderful woman, smart attorney, and a good friend of mine. And joining us today is Eva Saulnier. She is an attorney at law in Cleveland for Zashin Rich, and she joined the law firm in 2021. And her practice is fascinating. She is an American-trained and a French-trained attorney. And her practice includes domestic relations such as divorce, dissolution, property division, child and spousal support, or parental rights and responsibilities. And you might think, well, what does this have to do with speaking of women's health? Well, unfortunately, these are aspects that affect a lot of women and families' lives. Now, she's a French national with law degrees from both the United States and France, as I mentioned, and she has a particular interest in international family law issues, specifically those touchy, very important custody issues that also implicate the 1980 Hague Convention on the civil aspects of international child abduction. On a lighter note, I met Eva golfing. It was a small course, and I wondered, why is she in a golf cart? Because, usually most serious golfers will walk those kind of courses, particularly since she was playing off the men's, farthest tees. Well, little did I know until I met her that she had her brand new, cute little dog who's right behind you, and hopefully he'll behave during all of this. There he is, Napoleon Bonaparte. Oh my goodness, what a great name for that American gentleman dog. So she was a Division I student athlete in college, golf, of course, top of her team, and she was also a member of the French national golf team. And I know our listeners know how much I love golf. She's also a classically trained harpsichordist, having studied at Le Conservatoire Français Polec in Tours, France.
Yeah, you did great.
And she remains a classical musical enthusiast, and she's married to another attorney, Douglas Palawa, who is just fabulous. So welcome, Eva. I am so excited to have you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, you are just wonderful, and this is going to be interesting and a little bit different than our usual health and exercise and diet and sleep and hormones and all the things that we usually go over in our podcast. But I just thought that this is such an important issue that really, if it doesn't touch your life individually, it might touch one of your family members' lives. So tell me, why did you decide to become an attorney?
Well, I think it's kind of my parents that I used to defend my little brother all the time, even though he was in the wrong sometimes. And they kept telling me, you should just be an attorney. Like, you keep defending he's clearly in the wrong. So I think they told me that so many times that when I was trying to see what I would do in the future, that's kind of where I went for.
Well, Armand is just a fabulous younger brother who towers over you, and he's so excellent. And that is important, that it is part of jurisprudence that everyone gets a defense, and there's generally always two sides to a story. How did you choose family law?
Kind of pure happenstance. I got a summer internship. I was looking for one when I was in law school. Ended up at Zashin Rich and loved the practice, but most of all, loved the people I work for. They're really true mentors, and that's just how I ended up there.
So how does one go about finding an attorney who's qualified?
I think it's still a lot of word of mouth. People just, especially in divorce, as you said earlier, I think everyone knows someone that has gone through one, unfortunately, or is going through one. So usually it's referrals from people that have unfortunately had to go through that.
And so if you don't have any word of mouth, is there any state or local kind of database? Or should people take a look at the website and look at people's backgrounds? Is there anything related to that you would think that would stand out?
There's for family law, there's what's called the AAML, which is the American Matrimonial Association. I don't even remember all of the letters, but that's kind of like where people look, and you'll see a lot of lawyers listed that have this accreditation. A couple of our colleagues have that, and that's how they're found. Google, Google and the AAML.
So we can maybe put maybe that link perhaps in the show notes, as well as a link to people contacting you or your firm.
Absolutely.
So tell me a little bit about, I know you just said that in Ohio, the postnups are now available. Tell us a little bit about prenups and postnups, or things that people should think about long maybe before they get married and certainly have children.
Yeah, and I think it kind of goes with the topic of being strong, being in charge. During prenups, we will, draft in the event that the divorce happens. But I think it's really nice for people to have, for the prenup to be valid, you have to do a financial disclosure. So they kind of exchange their assets, their liabilities, so people have a full picture of what's going on in terms of their finances. And I think that's really, really good, because it's one of the leading factor in divorces. Is just people don't have the same idea of how they spend their money, of how they're investing their money. So at least to start your marriage knowing what's going on and kind of knowing what are we going to do with this money, how are we going to invest it, which is, I think, nice. So that's what we do in prenups. Sometimes we say, they're going to put all of their income in one joint bank account. They are going to spend like this. It's really, really detailed sometimes, and I think that's pretty nice.
Because I have heard of people getting married and then they didn't know that their spouse had so much debt or had a gambling problem, or just didn't have the same approach to money. So I guess money and sex and children are some of the top triggers that can split people up or maybe bring them together?
Yeah, definitely. Kids, obviously, it's hard. When sometimes I see people come in and they have very, very little kids and they're like, it's hard. I'm like, yeah, you have little kids. It's going to be difficult. I never tell people you definitely should get a divorce. That is never what we say. We say, have you tried to work on your marriage? Because maybe that is not businesswoman whatsoever, but I think people need to be sure before going through that step.
Now,
and money is definitely a big component of it.
And if someone isn't sure, maybe that they need a family law attorney, but maybe they think they do, is there anything that they should do to get organized before they start to see you? And does the clock tick? Are finances done just based on settlements, or is it a per hour? Or what are some of the things that people might need to know who don't have experience in hiring attorneys?
And it's also a tip for a successful marriage, I think, is, again, knowing what does the finances of your marriage look like? How does it get spent? Do you have access to the utilities bills and things like that? It's just sometimes people come in and they've been happily married for years and years and years, and it was their spouse that would do all of the money stuff, and they have no idea. They have no idea where the bank accounts are, how it's being spent, and it makes I'll do it. I have ways of finding that out. We can send out subpoenas, no problem, but it makes their divorce a lot more expensive because I have to go through all of the discovery. When people come in and they have a list of all of their assets and liabilities already set out, it makes my job a lot easier, and it's cheaper for them because the bill is going to be, it's based on the time I spend. So every 6 minutes, I have to track, which is a weird way of living. No one should live like that. I have to track everything I do every 6 minutes. So the more time I spend on your case, the more expensive it's going to be.
Yes, in the medical field, we occasionally, like every month or two, have to track exactly what we do medically in terms of how much is patient care, how much is research, how much is teaching, how much is administration, to kind of prove what it is we're doing. And it's just to live like that and have to track everything you're doing. Then you realize how much you're working. But my husband's an attorney, and I remember he would say, if I'm just thinking about the case going to the bathroom, that's 6 minutes.
Does that count?
Oh my. So certainly that's one reason why to be extremely organized anytime you're going for any kind of legal advice, even if it's not for dissolution. And I think even if you're in a happy marriage or a relationship with a person, or your family members, just getting all your paperwork in order, because I know my husband's father died a couple of years ago, and it's still, the whole estate stuff is still going on, and trying to discover this and information and accounts and passwords. When you're already grieving or undergoing stress, it's sometimes just too much.
Yeah. Definitely. And the digital life now has been taken it's taken such a big part of your life, like all of the social medias and things like that. When someone passes away, it's really difficult if you don't have the password and username to change that, to delete those, or to it's just difficult.
So people, in addition to having their will and estate and trust, should also probably have all their passwords and all their social media and what they want to happen with their social media when they pass on to the next life. And we're actually going to have, I have a future podcast booked with a physician that actually specializes in all the end of life care and decisions and powers of attorney and advanced directives. So we'll be going over that. But getting back into the whole marriage situation, what are the legal grounds in Ohio? Because, of course, we're in Ohio, but you could also speak to other states or other countries, too, if you want to, in terms of obtaining a divorce.
So Ohio is a non-fault state, meaning that you don't actually need to prove any grounds to obtain a divorce. People can still claim, adultery or abuse or abandonment, drunkenness, all of that, but it doesn't, at the end of the day, and my clients hate it when I say it, but it doesn't matter. It's not going to change anything. Unless there are minor kids, and then it can be a problem if there's alcohol or things of that nature. But to obtain a divorce, you really just need to say that your marriage is incompatible, or if you've been living separate and apart for over a year, that's sufficient, and that kind of is it. So if you want a divorce, you will be granted one, no questions asked.
And what if you never went through the paperwork? Because I have some patients that have been in long-term relationships. They're like a husband and wife. They've been together for 20-some years, had children. Is common law marriage, does that have any effects in terms of assets and child custody and all of that?
No. The assets will remain separate, so they don't become marital. But if they have children, obviously, there's going to be child support involved. Maybe if there's a difference of income, there's going to be custody involved. So then they'll go to juvenile court, not domestic relations court. Domestic relations court is for married people, and juvenile is going to be for unmarried parents, which there are more and more. Juvenile court is getting overwhelmed.
Oh, really? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So who determines how assets are divided in a divorce?
So it's going to be, if there's no agreement by the parties, it's going to be the magistrate or the judge that is appointed for their matter. In Ohio, it's pretty much equitable, so every single marital asset are going to be pretty much divided in two. It depends if it's a marital asset or a separate asset, and that delves into where we fight. Is it a separate asset or is it a marital asset?
So several years ago, I participated on this forum. I mean, I was not getting divorced, but it was put on by people that are involved with divorce. And I was just talking about the health aspects and, how to reduce stress and, things like divorce and death and major moves, even major vacations can rank up there in terms of stress levels and how to handle that. So that was my perspective. And when I was texting some friends, they thought that I was getting divorced. They misconstrued me. I'm like, no, I'm just talking about that. But they talked about some trend in divorce, like where you try to get everybody like collegial or on the same page, or are there any techniques for that, or is it usually just pretty strictly adversarial?
No, yeah, there's several ways of divorcing. You can do a dissolution. So a dissolution is you will amicably reach an agreement, and then you will petition the court to grant that dissolution of marriage. So the court is not really involved at all. It's people coming together, doing four-way meetings with their attorneys, or having a mediator or an arbitrator even, come in and sit down and go through the assets, the liabilities, and things of that nature. So usually, people that don't want to fight, they are just done with their marriage, and they are both on the same page regarding that. It's more cost effective to do it that way than going through the court. It's also going to be a lot faster to do it that way, because the court, if you are in a marriage with minor children, has 18 months to get your case done, so it's a long time to go through that process.
Well, you have been listening to the Speaking of Women's Health podcast. I am your host, Dr. Holly Thacker, and we are talking to a family law attorney and expert, Eva Saulnier, and I have so many additional questions. Can you tell me what a guardian ad litem is? I've heard that term when my husband's talked to attorneys.
Yes. A guardian ad litem in my world is going to be an attorney usually that is appointed for minor children. So he or she will act as kind of the attorney for the children. He or she will make an investigation to determine what is in the best interest of the children in terms of custody or parenting schedule, things of that nature. So it's kind of a way for the kids to be heard, because we don't really want them to have to go to the trial and have to testify against their parents. That would be terrible for them. So it's kind of a safe space for them to talk with someone that will understand the motivations behind wanting to be with mom or dad, for example.
Wow. And do you have any advice, like when people are involved in any divorce, but especially contentious divorce, like, with social media, we talked about just being so ubiquitous and part of people's lives. I imagine that in some ways that people find out that maybe their spouse is cheating on them. Some of the stories I've heard. Do you have any general advice about how people should just conduct themselves on social media?
Don't talk about it on social media. Nothing whatsoever. Don't post anything. Because it will be used against you, and it doesn't help. It's not gonna help. So just maybe delete Facebook and Instagram, and don't even post anything. It's not gonna help.
And so, how do the courts decide who gets custody of children in a divorce? Do we still have that precedent that mothers tend to be favored, especially if they've been the primary caregiver of the child, or is that not really the modern way anymore?
So Ohio is moving towards shared parenting more and more. There are laws in the works down in Columbus to make it kind of the standard, and then you can petition to have sole custody, but that would be the standard. We're not there yet, but I think that's the direction we're going towards. But right now, so the guardian ad litem is going to be a vital piece of that decision. So the guardian ad litem does all of their investigation. They goes to mom's house, dad's house, talk with teachers and friends and family, and then that's how we usually determine what is in the best interest of the kids.
Interesting. And what about how alimony and palimony is determined? Because I've got some highly successful patients, of course, in my practice with good incomes, and many of them say that they have to pay palimony to their spouse, their ex-spouse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So now we call it spousal support for some reason. I don't know why. I think Ohio thinks it's better because it's more gender neutral.
Yes.
I don't know. Probably. Because, obviously now women pay more and more spousal support. Men generally don't like when we call it spousal support, so we just say advanced property division.
Oh, advanced property division. That's interesting.
We call it something else because it can hurt people's egos. But yeah, it's determined based on the duration of marriage, the disparity of income, if one of the parents or spouse stopped working to raise the children and they missed out on their work opportunity, then there's a lot of factors. There's no formulas that are very cut and dry. It's kind of going to depend on who's your hearing officer. So not super helpful, but
wow.
Very variable.
And so what are the just general statistics in Ohio or just the United States at large in terms of the percent of people divorced?
I'm not sure what the percentage is. I know that whenever the economy gets worse, there's less divorces. And whenever the economy thrives, there's more. So when times are hard, people do not get divorced. So I'm not sure. I do know that COVID did not help a lot. I mean, some people all of a sudden got stuck with each other at home, and they were like, I'm not sure I like this person anymore.
Geez. Well, there was a lot of increase in domestic abuse and child abuse as well. Yeah. And I'm sure those are just heart-wrenching cases. Certainly if it's happening to either spouse or any child, it's just horrific and not acceptable. On the other hand, certainly I've just heard in my own circles and just through my own experience, just knowing just so many people throughout my lifespan, that sometimes there's false accusations made about one parent to try to help them in the divorce or in the child custody.
We'll be back after a quick break.
Hey, quick question for you. Are you someone who wants to be fit, healthy, and happy? And what if I told you could get your dream body by simply just listening to a podcast? I'm Josh.
And I'm KG, and we are the hosts of the Fit, Healthy, and Happy podcast.
Listen, we get it. Fitness isn't easy. Carbs, no carbs.
Just stop, okay? It doesn't have to be that complicated. And that's why we made this podcast. We get straight to the facts so you can become your best you.
So the way to check us out is click the link in the show notes or search Fit, Healthy, and Happy podcast on any of the major podcast platforms. We'll see you soon.
Yeah, it happens, unfortunately, and it's really... I think people do that thinking it's going to help them in their divorce or custody battle, but it's not. And I just want to tell people this is not going to help, and the people who's going to get hurt the most are the children.
Yes.
The children are going to get hurt because they're going to find out eventually, and it's just not good for them. So
just
but it is
heart-wrenching.
Yeah.
What happens when a parent does not pay for the court-ordered child support?
Typically, so the child support is going to go through the child support agency in Ohio. So the agency is going to take the child support directly from the person's pay stub. So it's going to be taken out directly, so they can't really escape paying child support. Child support is non-dischargeable, so even if you file for bankruptcy, that is not something you can get rid
Oh,
of.
interesting. Interesting. What about if you flee
Yeah.
the state or you flee the country?
Yeah, that gets tricky. The states, there's a child agency for every single state, so we will be able to find them eventually and get that back. If that person flees the country, it gets trickier. It's gonna depend on the other countries if they want to help or not, because then we don't really have any jurisdiction.
Wow. So that's got to make it even more challenging.
Yeah. And then the question then becomes, is it worth incurring all of those legal fees to get child support back? Is the juice worth the squeeze, as one of my colleagues says all the time?
So besides, of course, children, which are the most important thing to have to deal with a divorce or dissolution, and obviously property and retirement and other assets, I just have a lot of women who talk to me and tell me that, that's one of their stresses. They're thinking about being separated and they're not really sure. And it seems like a lot of women don't even know where all their assets are or their husband's assets are.
Yeah, and I think that's something you should demand in your marriage, is to know where the money is going, how it's being spent, and have username and passwords for not everything, but a lot of things. I think it's very important.
And do you think that couples should each have separate money separated and then some joint? Or does it just depend on the couple and their values?
I think it depends. It depends on the couples, but I think it's a good idea to have at least one bank account in your own name with some emergency funds. I see that because it does happen that when one party drains the joint bank account and then file for divorce, and then the other spouse is left with nothing for a period of time until the court is going to be able to divide and get the money back. You'll get the money back, but for that period of time you have nothing. So it's important to have some emergency funds, I think.
And I think that certainly women in domestic violence and abuse type situations, that's really common, and a way to control them is they don't have any credit cards, or all the credit cards or the money and assets are frozen.
Yeah, I think you need to be able to have some funds, so if you want to leave, you can leave, because that's kind of the first thing they say is, where am I gonna go? I have nowhere to go. But if you have some funds, obviously that helps. That are your own and that he can't touch.
Do you refer to any social service agencies or social workers? Like if someone comes to see you and they haven't let their spouse know that they're going to leave and want a divorce, and they're worried about the whole specter of domestic violence in terms of resources and things to have planned out, because I think at least medically they teach us that when the woman leaves, that's when is the highest risk of violence, if there's been a history of violence in the relationship.
Yes. When they come and it looks like there's domestic violence, sometimes they don't tell us, but we can tell, and we ask them and then they tell us. We want to make sure that before there's any filing of complaint of divorces, that they have a safe place to go, that they can be with friends or family, or that they can be supported. And that's more important to do that first, and then we'll deal with the divorce. But
yeah, safety.
Making sure that they're in a safe environment is number one priority.
Absolutely. Can you talk a little bit about this new law that you were telling me about that was passed about post-nups, and who's doing that? Have you seen an uptick in your business?
Yes. Ohio was kind of the last state to make this legal.
Interesting.
So finally, we're there. We're joining the group. So now a post-nup is gonna be exactly like a prenuptial. But it's after getting married, and it's gonna be a contract that will say how your assets and liabilities will be divided should a divorce arise. So we are seeing this more and more with people that, they're working on their marriage, They really want to stay married, but they've hit a rough patch, and they like to have some sort of contract that makes it easier down the road if it doesn't go well. So we have those. It was passed in March, and we've had already 10, 15. So it's pretty good. I guess people are getting interested in that.
So is it primarily just for people that I think they might have a rough patch, or is there any other reason to do it if someone's maybe in a new business venture that's riskier and they're taking the risk and want the assets or something along those lines?
Yeah, I mean, usually for prenups or postnups, it's gonna be usually people that have businesses, people that have been in marriages before and gone through the divorce and learned their lesson. Or when there's like a very big difference of income, that's what I think Mr. Napoleon is.
Oh, he is. He is. And what about pets? Like, so for instance, if God forbid that you got divorced, who would have Napoleon?
Yes, that is a big question.
He's so cute.
Are considered...
I can see him over your shoulder. He's like, I don't want my parents to get divorced. No, that's terrible.
Yeah, because, it's considered to be property. So the person that lives with the pet is generally going to be the person that keeps the pet. But we've had quite a bit of cases where if there's minor children, the pets will just follow the same schedule as the
that's
children,
sweet.
Which is
that's nice.
That's pretty, and I think that's nice because at least it's gonna be already hard enough for the kids to transition with two homes, but at least they have their dogs with them at all times. So that's nice.
that is soothing, and there are certainly a lot of health benefits to pets, lowering blood pressure and having another creature to care for. So as we wrap up, is there any other advice that you want to give our listeners on how to remain strong and in charge during their marriage or in the very, sad event of a divorce?
Well, we've gone through a couple which were, know where your money is going and how it's being spent, have some emergency funds in a bank account that's your own. And then if you are a stay-at-home mom, for example, try to keep your certifications and diplomas up to date at all times, because we never know if there is a divorce. You will probably get spousal support for a little bit, but it's not going to last forever, and you'll have to go back in the workforce, and that'll make it easier.
I mean, that's one advice that I give to young women, is even if you don't have to work, and certainly I think it's very admirable for women to be homemakers and raising their children. That's very important. I just think that no one knows what the future holds, and as part of being strong, healthy, and in charge, it is really good to keep up skills, whether it's for paid work or volunteer work. It's good for your brain. It's good for your body to have a schedule. So how can our listeners contact you, or is there any websites or any information in parting that you want to give?
Yeah, so the Zashin Rich law website, if you just type Zashin Rich, you'll find our website. We have a blog with some articles about family law, if you have any questions. And then you'll see all of the attorneys and my bios on there, and there's my email, so I can be reached that way.
Well, that is so great. Well, thank you so much, Eva, for joining us in the Sunflower House. You've been listening to the Speaking of Women's Health podcast, and I am your host, Dr. Holly Thacker. And I want to thank our listeners for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode and you want to support the podcast, share it with others. Give us a 5-star rating. And to catch all the latest from me, you can subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, or you can go on our website, speakingofwomenshealth.com. So thank you again, and thanks for joining us.